that in the chat.
Awesome. Well, I know we're just a couple minutes after the hour, so I think we can go ahead and get started, and I'm sure more people will be joining in as we kind of kick off. But I'm Natalie Kramer. I'm the Marketing Automation Manager at McGraw-Hill Higher Ed. I'll be moderating today's office hours with our awesome champ panel that we have with us today. So just before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to go through. So as you notice, this webinar is being recorded, and we will share it out after the event, so you can watch for that if there's anything that you missed. If you have any questions, you can just go ahead and put them in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and we'll be picking them up from there. And then if you're posting on social media, you can use our hashtag MarketingNation. And then we'll go ahead and kick it over to the champs that we have on the call. Alex, do you want to go first with the intro?
Sure, yeah. My name's Alex Lane. I'm the Manager of Marketing Automation at John Hancock Manulife. So I run a team of 3 campaign ops specialists and myself from a platform perspective, and we collectively own 5 Marketo instances. So lots going on with lots of different business lines and B2B, B2C, B2B2C. We really kind of run the gamut. So all those kinds of questions will be fun to answer.
Amy, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Amy Goldfein. I'm the Senior Marketing Operations Manager at Trimble, based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been helping companies, automate and scale and do marketing ops since around 2013 or 2014. 3-time Marketo champion. I also run the San Francisco Marketo user group, and shameless plug, I am hiring. So if you're looking for a job doing platform operations and analytics and some enablement, come talk to me. I would like you on my team.
Awesome. Chris, do you want to go?
Sure. Chris Willis, Global Marketing Operations Manager for Trimble Construction, based in the Denver Boulder area. I think we win the contest for how many orgs we manage. I think we manage about 7 or 8 orgs across multiple business lines, and I am used to be a team of 1, but now I have like a marketing operations specialist that I'm grooming to take my place as I move up.
Nice. Josh?
Sure, team. My name is Josh Freckles. I am the Customer Experience Lead at Crimson Global Academy. We are New Zealand's first online high school. So I have been using Marketo for about 7 or 8 years now. Our Marketo instance is just a single Marketo instance managing about 50 people globally and 7 business units out of it. So it's a bit of a nightmare, but we get there.
Awesome. Thank you all. So as I said, I know a few people have joined in here as we've been doing introductions. You can just go ahead and enter your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. We'll go ahead and kick it off with some questions for the group. So I think being around summit timeframe, there's a lot of people who are looking to get recertified in Marketo. So I have some questions around, I know it's called a different name now, but it's still kind of the same test. But do you guys have any tips for studying and taking it virtually?
I have so many thoughts on this. I can start off with the sort of tips for actually taking the exam. I think for a lot of us, this is maybe our first time taking it remotely. I definitely took it at a testing center. Maybe you've taken it at Summit. So if you're kind of concerned about what's it like to take the test remotely, there are 2 different providers, Examity and PSI, and everyone I know has said to use Examity, and that's what I used. Examity uses remote meeting software like GoToMeeting or Zoom. PSI, you have to download their own software, which can add another layer of complication because you can't test it ahead of time, whereas you probably have GoTo, Zoom, all those systems on your computer already. You need a working camera and mic. You cannot use external monitors. You cannot use headphones. So get your monitor off, if it's more comfortable, move your laptop up, put it on your monitor riser, add some books, whatever you need to do to make yourself comfortable on a 13-inch screen. Clear off your desk, clear off anything within reach of your desk. As they're basically really concerned about anybody cheating. So they will probably make you rotate your camera to make sure there's no notes on the wall behind your monitor. They might ask to see your glasses, take off your watch, just remove that. I know everybody's addicted to their Apple Watches, but you can be without it for an hour. The thing that like really trips me up is you cannot read questions aloud and you can't even like mouth the words, which for me, in order to slow down, that is what I do naturally to make sure I'm like reading the question properly. So when you practice reading the questions out loud in your head, as you know, if that is kind of your default. But like literally I had to purse my lips closed so I could not say them out loud. Yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts about like taking the test. And if somebody else want to talk about like studying for the test and topics and any like specific things?
Yeah, some things that you like you may see on the test that you may not have seen on any of the previous tests. They will ask a lot more like business practical type of questions. It's not going to be necessarily where is this button or like what is this smart campaign, where is the smart campaign module, like questions like that. It's going to be like there's going to be a lot of application questions that are going to be in the test. Like the questions where they'll show a smart campaign and then we'll ask you a question about how the leads would qualify. So I would definitely be familiar with that. They're also going to ask questions about the dashboards, which I don't think we've previously had any program dashboard type of questions, but there are quite a few in the exam. So familiarize yourself with the dashboards.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. Our next question is, I'm developing a nurture program, but need emails to be dynamic based on 3 fields: language, persona, and company role. What's a good way of doing this?
I can probably take this one. Off the top of my head, there's probably a couple of ways that you could look at doing this. The first thing that kind of comes to mind is to probably have like a really overcomplicated segmentation built into Marketo that kind of relies on different segments based on each of those three parameters. That can get really overcomplicated really, really quickly, especially when there are so many limitations around how many segmentations you can have in Marketo and how many segments that you can kind of have there as well. I think the best way to probably approach that is probably to look at having multiple nurture programs based on, say, 1 or 2 of those parameters. I think one of them was language. Probably to start there and have different nurture programs based down on language, and then inside each of those nurture programs, that's where you can break down into streams the various other one of the fields, maybe like I think it was role, and then using dynamic content to actually filter out based within that again. The other option is, if you have the skills or if you have got a developer nearby, would probably be to rely on velocity scripting, because that's going to make your life a lot easier for sure. But yeah, I think that the second option's the best option there. Yeah. No,
I definitely think that like using segmentations to put people in the right nurture is so useful, because then you know that somebody can never qualify for, if you have like, maybe a North America nurture and an EMEA nurture, and you want to make sure they're only in one, then you can have like a marketing region segment and make sure they're in the right nurture, so Marketo's not trying to send them multiple emails at the same time.
Great. Our next question, I'm trying to enable my marketing team to be self-sufficient in Marketo for day-to-day builds, but keep noticing errors in their program. How can I help them do things correctly?
I can take this one. So I would say we've bumped into this a ton, most recently because we just started taking over a couple of the other instances that I mentioned at the top of the call. And previously there had really been no power user in Marketo. It was really just whoever had capacity to build could build. So we started ground up with, doing a field audit, figuring out what was actually flowing to our CRMs, and then building out our channels and tags based off of what we knew we were going to have to be deploying, and then helping to enable a center of excellence where programs were pre-built according to those channels with the appropriate statuses, with the assets that they would need, and obviously leveraging whatever tokens we had enabled on that particular instance within those assets, so that the marketing managers really only had to like clone, copy, update, rather than building from scratch every single time. And we were able to kind of help facilitate those errors out the door. We still bump into stuff sometimes, but it's not nearly as much as it had been previously.
One thing that I would add is try, like when you develop these kind of best practice program templates, especially with novice users, like simplify the workflow as much as possible. Use your nested email programs inside of your templates so that you don't have users that are expected to know complex Marketo workflow. Kind of keep them in the box of what they know. That will simplify your life quite a bit.
Yeah, so we also have a decentralized team of marketers using Marketo. And one thing that I've tried to start doing is when there's like a fairly significant problem, doing like a small retro, not to make people feel bad, but just to try to get to understand about where the gaps are. And we had an issue, I can't remember what the issue was, but I did a retro with the marketing user and with her manager. And what I discovered, I said, well, this was in the SOPs. I write really detailed documentation. And I'm thinking why isn't this girl using this? I spend all the time. She didn't realize that she was supposed to go through the SOPs every time. She thought it was kind of like using Google Maps. You use Google Maps one time to get somewhere, and then you're trying to learn how to go. So you try to, not use maps. I was like, no. You should follow the checklist every time, because I follow the checklist every time. If I was going to build a webinar, I build a million webinars. I still follow the checklist because I'm going to forget something. And she was like, well, that document is pages and pages long with screenshots. And so what I ended up doing was, at the beginning of all my campaign documentation, was adding a quick snapshot that is just bullet points of do this, clone this, activate this, edit this. And that way, when you've done it a few times, you just need a checklist. You don't need every single screenshot, but you have them all below. And that has actually a really reduced error rates. And it was something I would not have discovered had I not actually stayed really in close communication with my users about that.
Yeah, something that I can kind of add to this as well is because I've got such a global team. I have 55 users across 22 different countries, and so there's Amy space exactly. One of the difficulties that we've kind of got is probably one of the difficulties that a lot of people here are experiencing. And so to everyone's note already around program templates, it's the very first thing that we actually started with. The two administrators, myself and the one other, are based here in New Zealand and Australia, and so that obviously doesn't meet everyone's time zone kind of capabilities. So what we ended up doing is, for everybody, there are the two administrators, and then we have a team of 5 sort of pro or super users in Marketo. They don't quite have administrative access, but they are the only ones outside of the 2 admins who have the ability to activate anything. So we're the only ones who can upload data. We're the only ones who can actually look at activating smart campaigns. For brand new users and for users across the world, this is a huge weight off their shoulders, because they're not actually panicking about worrying about accidentally sending anything or anything like that, because they've got a team of super users who can go through that approval process for them. We do have a ticketing system in place, which does mean that for any time they need an approval, they need to give us 24 hours notice, so that at least the super users are spread out around the globe, and someone will be able to pick it up in ample time, which is proven for us to be really, really useful, really impactful.
Yeah, user controls is so important, and having a good QA process. I have a QA checklist that when people queue up an email that the user has to use, and then the reviewer, either another coworker or their boss, has to do, and they have to keep it, they clone it into the same spreadsheet, so there's a record, so we know, and it's everything from basic email QA, grammar and all that, but also what does your smart list look like? Did you include the marketable segmentation? If it's operational, why is this operational? So they really have to think through it, I think is really important.
Yeah, that was another big tip, was not letting the person who builds the email also deploy the email. There has to be some layer of checkpoint in place to mitigate some of that error.
Let me show a raise of hands. Who here still gets anxious when they have to deploy an email? Anybody? See? Yeah. I kind of feel if you don't get anxious deploying an email, and you're not kind of having a nervous pit in your stomach every time you run a live webinar, you're not doing it right.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Ditto.
Awesome. Thank you guys. That's all awesome feedback. Another question. So I'm excited about the new program member custom fields feature. Where should I get started and what use cases are you finding valuable?
Sure. I'll go ahead and pick that up. So it is you do have to think really strategically about like your use case because you are limited to having 20 of these program member custom fields. So I would definitely recommend this is not an excuse to just start creating new fields in the database. You want to you want to be strategic about like the fields that you create. And you can include them in forms, but the caveat is your forms have to be local, which for a lot of us is not a great practice. So just be aware that you may have to tweak some of your best practices if you use some of these program member like custom field best practices. I'll give you a couple that we've deployed in our orgs. So number one is like capturing UTMs for like digital ads on content assets. We'll typically capture a last touch UTM inside of our hidden fields in our forms. And then in those smart campaigns, I'll check for like whether the UTM campaign value has changed. We've got a new like UTM value, and then I will kind of paste that through the smart campaign flow. So you can look in the program membership and see like which ads have contributed to the kind of the download of that asset, and not just ads, but also email campaigns, organic social campaigns. And a second would be, of course, the event use case where you're collecting special kind of like event-related information, like food preferences and whatnot. That may be one of the only use cases where you may want to have the form local, because that would be a very a specialized use case. I'm curious, are any of you guys like deploying any different use cases with the program member custom fields? Or is it just us?
We didn't end up using them because we have like a weird form situation on our website, but we were looking at using program member custom fields to collect addresses so our conference is coming up, and we asked people optionally for their mailing address, because to like high value customers and prospects, we want to send like a viewing kit that's like, a mug and socks and pens and like sponsored stuff. But we really wanted to keep this data out, like as away from sales, right? Like this is private, like especially everybody's at home, like this is your private mailing address. And so we ended up doing it with just a Marketo only field rather than a Marketo Salesforce field. But initially we were going to do program member custom fields, because then it's like even more tucked away. Basically only anybody who knows how to look for it will be able to find it. So I think that's like a really good use case. I also really love the idea of like, t-shirt preference and dietary preferences, and, so somebody in the chat just said, in my previous org, we used them to send out Uber Eats coupon codes for webinar attendees. Yeah, I love that kind of.
That's
I think
pretty
also
cool.
like if you ask questions before a webinar about like, what would you like to learn on this webinar, or you ask some pre-qualification questions, that you could definitely use PMCF for that.
Yep. The rule of thumb that I think about using those custom fields is if the data that you want to capture is very specific to that campaign, then you potentially would have a use case. Otherwise, there's other places to kind of capture the information.
Great. So our next question is, I had an email that was supposed to go to 10,000 people, but it only sent to about 4,000. How do I figure out what happened?
My default answer is always going to be communication limits, because if you know me, I I one time went down a rabbit hole with Kimberly Galitz and JD Nelson, and I think Keith Nyberg about Comm Limits, and actually wrote like kind of a manifesto, which I will post a link to it here. But that would be like my first question is, did they hit Comm Limits? And the easiest way to sort of like dive down, like why did some people not receive my email, is to pull up a smart list of people who you thought should have received the email and add the filter, was not sent email, this email. So you create a new smart list, add that filter, add the filter logic, and then you can figure out like, is there some commonality with all these people? Like, did I, look at maybe their subscription preferences? Did I forget to include the like, is not unsubscribed, or if you have like a marketability filter, right? Additionally, you can tell somebody hit Comm Limits. I think it says, does he remember the exact language for Comm Limits? It's like skip sending due to hitting daily, weekly communication limits. That'll be really clear. And send in recipient time zone can also be like a weird thing. It will show as sent but not delivered. You may see like a gap in your email program. I saw that once and I was like, what is this? And support was like, oh, you chose send in recipient time zone, but I think they sent the email and queued up the email for like 30 minutes before, which meant the email was going to deploy for like the next 24 hours. So there was like a weird discrepancy there. But yeah, definitely like marketing suspended, blocklisted, unsubscribed. I like having a marketability segmentation in my instance, and I include that in all my email sends. It's in all the templates for all the email sends. And that way, when you create your smart list, you're already excluding all those people who aren't going to get the email. So you have a better list of how many people it's actually going to. Anybody have any other thoughts on Comm Limits or anything else about this?
Yeah, I'll add one item, because like if it's going out from an email program, the email program will skip the send, but the smart list in the email program won't necessarily tell you who hit the Comm Limits. So one hack that I've done is I actually set up an operational program to mirror my Comm Limits and marketing suspend my any records that reach Comm Limits and kind of keep them in suspended status until they're eligible to get emails. And that's just so that those emails show up in the blocked list, and it's pretty obvious to the person sending the email that these people aren't eligible to receive emails. That's kind of a little hack, and I'll probably be writing a blog about that at some point.
Awesome. Sounds great. I think we have a few other people join us here in the last few minutes or so. So if you have any questions, we're going through some right now. Just go ahead and add it to the chat and we'll get to it as we can. So we do have a current question. So it's a little bit of a long one. Stick with me here. I'll read it off from the chat. I'm implementing Marketo right now, and my Salesforce admin has advised about a recommended best practice of not assigning more than 10,000 records to the same user. Our situation is such that we have about 7,000 to 8,000 records that are newsletter subscribers who I was planning to assign to the Marketo user until they score to MQL. I can see us reaching 10,000 fairly soon. Any advice around this?
I think I can start off. I think there's a couple of things to think about. I think for a lot of orgs, you just assign to the right salesperson, based on whatever your territory assignment is. And sales does not look at people who have not MQL'd. So, that obviously depends a lot on your sales ops team and sales enablement and sales leadership about how they're viewing leads and contacts that are assigned, that are assigned to them. You need your view set up properly. Another option is to assign to a queue in Salesforce rather than the sync user, which should not hit those types of limits.
All right, let us know if you need clarification there.
Oh, that sounds good. Thanks. The one thing that our SFDC admin mentioned is that the queue is kind of the same thing as the user, that apparently basically Salesforce doesn't recommend having 10,000 records assigned to either to the same queue or to the same user, which there's some concept around it. But I think your suggestion about kind of splitting them to sales reps makes sense. I would just kind of have to train them to build out views for like DC leads versus A leads. So yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
All right, we'll move on to our next question. Can you explain what a custom object is and when you would use it over custom fields? Do you have any specific examples? Anybody want to take that one?
Great question, but that's out of my area of expertise. Anybody else?
Can have a go at it if you like. So.
I was going to offer too that I could jump in.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah. So
there's no takers from the panel. Yeah, we go open it up to John. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, we've got a lot of custom object or a custom object now. It's mostly because our data relationship is one person to many. Yeah, in this case, objects. So we don't have Salesforce either. So in our case with Booking.com, we work with the hotels. So we have one person that might manage multiple hotels, and we have each of these hotels as a custom object record. So then we look at the person and say, okay, find this person that has the property, which is the name of our custom object, that is either in France or a different country. And that's how we use them compared to a custom field, which is a one field that lives at a person level. So that's the main difference of them. If any more detail is required.
Awesome. Thank you for jumping in.
No problem.
All right. Let's look here at our questions. So the question is, we use a lot of webhooks, and one failed recently, and they didn't realize it until it was too late. Is there a way to get notified about webhook errors?
I can take that. I think a lot about like how to scale notifications and how to like basically get notified of hidden issues in your Marketo instance, because there's a handful of things that Marketo will not tell you about. So I have a operational program for notifications, and what you're looking for, the trigger is webhook is called error type is not successful. I will double check that. I think I wrote a blog post about this, which I will post in here. But basically, Marketo can tell you when a webhook fails, and then you can use the send alert step, and you can use trigger tokens. You can just have one alert email, and then you can have it trigger to send to you with all the information of like which webhook failed, and then you can figure it out. So like we use webhooks for our webinar provider, so that is like really key to know when that fails. We also use webhooks to push demo requests to Slack, event for our conference registrations to Slack. So I want to know, especially the demo ones, like I really want to know when that fails, because that's part of how our SDR team follows up with demo requests. So yeah, that is really helpful. I love this topic. The other thing that you will not know unless you have Marketo tell you is if you're using a webinar provider with an event adapter, which by the way, there's a lot of that on the certification exam. So if you're using like GoToWebinar or WebEx or Zoom, where you create the program and then you click like add event provider, and it does the thing where like you register them in Marketo, it pushes the registration to the platform. There's like a API ping that happens, right? Registers in Marketo, it pings to GoTo says back, yes, we have registered this person. If the registration fails for some reason, Marketo will not tell you. You will see them as registration error in the program members, but Marketo will not tell you, and you'll be very sad when you find out that you have dozens or hundreds of people who are not in your webinar provider. So same sort of thing. I have a trigger that's, let's say, program status has changed. Program is any status is webinar registration error, and then you have it send you an email. Typically, webinar errors happen either sometimes if there's like something weird in their email address, if there's like or name is like a weird character, it'll fail. Also, sometimes the API connection in LaunchPoint just disconnects itself, and you would have no idea. So I think being really proactive about error notifications is super helpful. And let me dig through and see if I can find an article about that. Let's have some screenshots.
Anybody else want to add anything with that?
Yep. GoToWebinar is particularly bad with like disconnecting the API. So if you do use GoToWebinar, definitely have something like this in place.
Yeah, when we used GoToWebinar at my last company, I had to give admin launch point access to our EMEA team because if it failed in the middle of the night at my time, I did not want to be up at 2 a.m. getting a phone call that GoTo had disconnected. So I gave them launch point access and showed them how to reconnect it. Yeah, that is definitely a problem with GoToWebinar. I wasn't sure if I should mention the name, but we should all be honest about how these systems work together. So that can definitely be a challenge.
Question to tack on to that, Amy and Chris, is that primarily when you're using a Marketo-based form, or do you experience that when you're using like a GoToWebinar or On24-based form and landing page too for registration?
Great question. I have not. Elsa, can you mute maybe? Sounds things you're getting some background noise. Thank you. Yeah, for me, we've always used the Marketo forms. I think that my best practice is always use your forms because you control your website and your cookies and the tracking. You lose a lot when you register, but you obviously have fewer integration errors, right? Because ultimately the user experience goal is to get them in the webinar provider. So if they don't pass back to Marketo properly, you can fix that in post, for sure. Anybody have any other thoughts on that?
You covered it really well.
Awesome. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat right now. If you guys have more or if people have joined, definitely feel free to put them in there. I know a lot of us have been thinking about Adobe Summit coming up the end of April. So I'm curious to hear from you guys. What sessions are you looking forward to? What type of things are you hoping to learn from the summit this year?
I'm excited to hear Dan Levy talk. I'm a big Schitt's Creek fan, so I'm pumped that he's a keynote this year. I know that's not Marketo related, but
I mean, it's pretty dope.
It works.
I'm trying to sign in to Summit to look at the things that I have, look at the sessions that I have registered
I think it's interesting too. I can just chime in a little bit maybe when you're pulling that up, Amy. The keynotes in general, the other business speakers they're having this year, it speaks to our times really well, I think. They have the CEO of Pfizer, they have the CEO of Peloton. It's just you guys are really capturing the moment, getting people who've been, very involved with where we're at culturally. So, beyond just other Marketo sessions and Adobe sessions, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like the fact that it's now the past couple of years been Adobe Summit, not just Marketo Summit, there's such a broader range of sessions. I am pretty particular to the technical Marketo sessions, but the fact that they can get really big speakers and they can, both the fun people like Dan Levy and then, the thought leaders from, big companies is really cool. I did not. Pro tip, register for sessions ahead of time so you're not scrambling on the day of. So I always attend the sessions with Marketo's product team. Weirdly, I'm looking and it looks like the same session might be twice, so I will double check on that, but there's a Marketo Engage Innovations, Up-Level Your B2B Marketing. They always call this session something a little bit different every year, and sometimes, last year, I felt like it was kind of hidden about what it was, but the guy you're looking for is Badshah Mukherjee, along with Niranjan Kumbhi. That is what is coming up in Marketo, and if you're a Marketo user and you're excited about what's coming, this is super cool. I think for a lot of us champions, we've been in product feedback sessions. So some of this is ooh, that was an idea that I had, or I contributed to that. And for those of you who have frustrations, or you're oh, I really wish they would do X. A lot of times you'll learn about that on this call. And I think it's just really exciting to see the product team who's super stoked about what they're building. It's just, I think that's really cool.
And I think too, that group is doing another session on what's next for the new Marketo Engage user experience.
Yes.
It might be different than the one you mentioned, but that one looks really cool and it's kind of hidden and it's called something different. So definitely go through and watch for those product teams from Adobe and Marketo, because that'll be everything that's coming beyond, drag and drop and things like that for the future of that. So definitely check that one out too.
Yeah, can we talk about drag and drop? Does everybody know drag and drop is back? This is super exciting. Yeah, and you may not have noticed if you haven't tried to use it, but drag and drop is back in the tree, and we are all very happy.
So happy. So happy.
What about the rest of y'all? What sessions are you interested in? Or what tips do you have for getting the most out of Summit?
I guess one of the sessions that I'm actually really looking forward to is, as we spoke to before, one of the things that I am contending with is the fact that we are such a global market. All my Marketo users are so global. I've got 55 of them across 22 different countries. So there's an interesting one that is coming up that is being hosted by Brooke and Christina, two other Marketo champs, around sort of like centralized versus decentralized models and what that kind of looks like, what works best for certain types of organizations. So because that's so front of mind with everything that I'm trying to challenge and trying to tackle at the moment, I'm really keen to kind of hear a little bit more about other tips and tricks that I can sort of leverage to sort of help to scale my users and actually enable them to grow a little bit more, depending on what type of model is going to actually work better for them.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. Like, I typically will sign up for the Marketo product sessions and then any session that champions are doing on tips and tricks, because there's always something like new and like interesting that you can learn. And like, I think there was a session a couple of years ago with the Schrodinger's cat where, there's like many ways to do things in Marketo, and some things will have that light bulb go off in your head. I think for me, like, the sessions I'm most interested in are the ones where we're talking about like the managing virtual events. I think a lot of us scrambled in this past year with the pandemic to figure out how to kind of adjust, especially companies that are like do a lot of trade shows, do a lot of exhibits. Like, we're scrambling to try to figure out how to kind of replicate this in the virtual world. And not all of it was perfect. And there's a lot of lessons learned that we can pick up on. And I think a lot of product vendors are coming up with really cool new technologies to help us manage that. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to.
Awesome. What about everyone else on the call? What are you looking forward to as you look through the session catalog for Summit? Definitely feel free to jump off mute. You don't just have to put it in the chat.
I'll jump in.
You have something.
What were you going to say, Alex?
I was just going to say there's one session around integrating the Adobe stack with Marketo better, and we're an AEM shop, so I'm really curious to see kind of like what the enhancements with those integration points are going to be, specifically around like the Creative Suite and the Document Cloud and what enhancements might be made. So curious to see how that one goes.
Do you have Marketo and AEM integrated right now, Alex?
We do, yeah.
Can you maybe like that be kind of interesting to like hear about your guys' use case for that? I feel like personally only thing I know about AEM is I've done some like UI feedback about it, but I don't have like a good mental map of like how it works and how you would use it with Marketo.
Yeah, so our primary integration right now is around form placement on the websites. So AEM is where we're hosting our sites, and then we're using Marketo forms across all of our landing and contact pages. And so it's really kind of like a light integration in that sense, but we're looking to figure out, are there ways that we can leverage things like Adobe Target for more personalization across the site that would then feed back into our Marketo instance to help enable our, email personalization and having those more targeted campaigns be kind of a unified orchestration, which I don't know that that's necessarily possible right now, but curious to see if it's on the roadmap for the not so distant future.
Very cool. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity with all the Adobe products. If you've ever seen like the timeline of Adobe's acquisition, there's just so much cool stuff
Yeah.
that Adobe has, and the opportunity to integrate them all, I think, is really cool.
Awesome. I think before we wrap up, and just one more question for everybody on the panel today, what kind of cool projects are you guys working on in Marketo right now? I think you all kind of hinted at different things you're doing, but is there something that you're really excited about?
I can take that to kick off if it's helpful. So I would say, like, I'll give broad context. Like 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we had Marketo, but we didn't have a marketing automation team. And so within the past kind of like year, really, we've been working to establish really foundational elements of Marketo. So standing up a folder structure, standing up channels and tags, making sure that all of those kind of elemental things are in place so that we can start doing more of the quote unquote like fun automation. And this week we rolled out new email templates that are using tokens for the first time ever, which is like bananas, but so exciting. And obviously that is playing on, the folder structure that we established and being able to kind of like look to all of those organizational things that are super unsexy and super boring, but, ultimately play a big part in making Marketo work for us. And then this week we were also able to take an initiative where normally one of my team members has to build out 11 different versions of the same email because she didn't necessarily have somebody that was helping to advise on like dynamic content and segmentations and using snippets and those kinds of things a year ago. And so for the past, however long, every month, she's been building out 11 versions of the same email in 11 programs. And it's like, stop doing that. So, she trained up on what dynamic content is and tried to learn how to implement that herself. And we were able to save her 10 hours this month, just doing that one initiative, like basic stuff, but super exciting in my world because it just hasn't existed before. Yeah, Amy, that was my response as well.
That's amazing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think that's why I like this job, is being able to like see things through an operational lens that people might not be able to see. And like, I feel like for me, I work at I don't know if we call this a startup anymore, but like we're still like smaller, and a lot of people have this like scrappy mindset, which I think is really important. But I'll learn that somebody's doing something and I'm like, no, like somebody wanted to, this is not like a Marketo thing specifically, but they wanted to, get event registrations from Salesforce report into a Google Sheet to continually share with partners for an event. And they were like, exporting like every day and updating it. And I was like, let me use G Connector for that. And it took me like 5 minutes to set up, and it dynamically updates, every hour. And that kind of just being able to like help people like solve problems and do things easier so they can spend more time doing the creative part of their work, I think is really, really gratifying.
That I think is the key thing for me as well. Like I never feel like I'm succeeding in my job unless I'm saving other people from overcomplicating their work, right? And so if that means that I can save a salesperson even like half an hour a week by automating some of their processes, that's half an hour they get back to actually sit on another couple of phone calls, right? Same with the marketing and sort of my data teams. Like if I can save them time, even if that's only 15 minutes a day or half an hour a week or something like that, that alone, that's like my most proud moment of the week, if I can automate something like that to just simplify those processes.
And I think that like also sets us as marketing ops professionals, like getting those like quick wins for, maybe Alex, in your case, I'm not quite so quick, but getting wins for other people like helps establish trust and helps establish that relationship and makes you a trusted advisor, which you need because sometimes you're going to have to like tell them to do something they don't want to do, or like you're going to have to implement things. There's this concept, I went to this leadership seminar and they talked about the concept of an emotional bank account. And basically in any relationship, you can either like add to the bank account or you can take away from it. And you always want to keep that relationship in the positive. And while I don't really think about my relationships as transactional, like it's really good to think about like how can you provide like positive interactions, like being supportive, being helpful, like helping people like learn how to do things and enabling them so that when you have to like correct somebody or you have to like change a process and it might be painful, that you already have that trust built and that like, relationship built so that they're like, okay, well, like this is going to be hard, but I know Amy has my best interests at heart. Chris, what about you? What are you working on that's exciting?
I don't know if anything that's is quite as exciting as what you guys are talking about, but from a technical perspective, we're in the process of like essentially like Trimble as a company is kind of grown by acquisition like over time. So part of the reason we have so many so many systems and so many lifecycle processes that we manage is because like each of our business lines are, operate with like a deep knowledge of the customer, and like in our business they operate like almost like I wouldn't say siloed. We've gotten better about connecting our business, but like our new CEO about a year ago really put us down this digital transformation path about a year ago, and we're starting to talk about consolidating our tech stack and consolidating our life cycle to really like see a 360-degree view of the customer, and talking to our construction customers in a really awesome thought leadership perspective. And I've been involved in a lot of those projects. It's unfortunately not necessarily like a 1 month or a 2 month project. This is more of like a 2-3 year initiative. But it's really exciting for me, like change management is really exciting. And to see some of the products of that, we just released like kind of a Netflix style series called Spotlight series. It's called Dimension Spotlight series. You can look it up, go register, and like we're doing like videos where we bring in thought leaders from like heads of like construction companies, and we've got like a partner from McKinsey talking about like the future of infrastructure in America, which is really relevant. And it's exciting to see us kind of up level our conversation and really talk to strategic trends in the market. So that's what's got me really excited.
That's awesome. Thank you guys all for sharing that. I think it's cool to see what other users are doing. We all use Marketo in such different ways, so it can really get you thinking of ideas to hear what other people are working on. Well, I know we have about 10 minutes left. It doesn't look like we have any other questions in the chat, though, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap up a little bit early. But thank you all for joining us today. Thanks to our awesome panel of champs for all of your insight into the questions. If you have any other questions, definitely feel free to post in the Marketo community. Us and others are always watching out there to help answer your questions. So thank you all.
Thank y'all so much. This was really fun.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks,
Good
guys.
team.
Bye, everybody.